in 30,
Okay.
in 36 US states, 4 Canadian provinces, and captive service facilities in 22 states and 3 provinces. It's also been found in Norway, Finland, Sweden, South Korea. And at this time, there are 7 different strains of it worldwide. There are positive cases in Wyoming, Montana, Utah, and Washington, so all around us. And Idaho's been testing since 1980 or 1998. Is when we started testing for it because we were surrounded. And we test mule deer, whitetail deer, elk, and moose. Go to the next slide. So this is the USGS map of where it was found prior to 2000. And so the yellow dots are CWD and captive service facilities. And then the gray is the counties where it was found in free ranging. So next. Okay, so go to 2005 and you can see that there were a lot more detections. And the red dots are, when this map was created, a current captive facility. So next. Okay, that is 2012. Next. 2019. Next. 2022. And this is current 2025. And as you can see, it's spread quite a bit. Now, CWD is not a living thing. It is a misfolded protein. So how is it moving this quickly? One way is captive cervids are shipped all over the place from Canada into the United States, from the United States to Canada, and all over states. Go to the next slide. And also, it's spread by sportsmen, by hunters. So this is the home zip codes of hunters harvesting deer in 2 different counties in Idaho, or in Iowa, sorry. So those are positive counties, and deer hunters go there, they shoot deer. And before we really knew how this spread, everybody takes those deer parts home. And if you've walked around in the woods here long enough, you've found places where people just dump carcasses off the side of the road. These misfolded proteins can stick around a long time, for years in the soil. And so if that's just 2 counties in Iowa, you can imagine during the fall, how many pieces and parts of animals are going all different places. Next slide. So what is CWD? It's an untreatable fatal brain disease in cervids. And cervids are whitetail deer, mule deer, moose, elk, and reindeer, caribou. It's classified as a TSE, which is a transmissible spongiform encephalopathy, or TSE. Transmissible means it can go from one animal to another. Spongiform means it creates spongy holes in the brain, and encephalopathy means it's just disorder of the brain. So it's caused by an abnormally shaped misfolded protein that accumulates within the brain cells. These little things are called prions, and it causes progressive damage to the cells and to the brain. And one of the unfortunate things is it's slow to develop, and the outward symptoms are only at the terminal end of the disease. So animals can carry it for up to a year and a half without showing any symptoms.
So cervidae, that's the subset of ungulates, is that right? Right, okay.
Right. All right, next slide. Okay, so CWD prion, it's not a bacteria, it's not a virus, it's not a fungi, and it's it's non-living protein. It's devoid of DNA. And the prion is short for protein infection particle. So this basically just shows a normal prion. And then just by being next to one of these misfolded proteins, it can cause other proteins to misfold the same way. And that's how it spreads. And so and it's also why it's so slow moving through an animal. So it's a non-living protein devoid of DNA. As a result, it's really extremely hard to kill by feasible means, and it stays on the landscape for a long time. They found that extreme heat can cause the protein to deactivate into a non-infective state. But extreme, like not well done steak, we're talking like 12 to 1500 degree heat. So even a controlled burn or a wildfire does not generate enough heat to kill these things on the landscape. Transmission, and we're not sure about this, but it's likely by eating a piece of grass with one of these prions that on it, nose to nose contact. And so it's animal to animal, but it can also be environmental. It's shed through saliva, urine, feces, and decaying carcasses. And once they're on the landscape again, they're on there and they're in their infectious state for years. We don't know if they can be taken up by plants, and we don't know if there's any watershed implications, but there's lots of research being done right now on CWD.
If they could be picked up by wildfire smoke, just like fungal spores. I mean, I wonder if they dry out though. That's something we have to get. Talk to Leland.
Okay. So animals can be infected in utero. And the disease has, like I said, a long incubation period, which is the time from when the animal gets infected to when you can see outward symptoms. Usually 12 to 18 months for the physical signs and symptoms to appear. It infects both sexes, and prevalence can vary anywhere from, like, right now, I think the prevalence in Idaho is 1% of the population. There are states that are upwards of 50 to 60% of the animals. So prevalence can be very high, and once it becomes established, it's difficult to contain. Okay, so the effects, the clinical signs that you see are emaciation, decreased awareness, excessive salivation, and just walking in repeated patterns. A lot of times it's in a circle. Ears tend to droop heavily on a deer. Most of the time you see a deer, its ears are alert. Drooping ears are a really good sign, and tremors, they'll be kind of shaking. And I've got a video of an animal here. So this is a picture of a captive white-tailed deer buck, and it's in the emaciated stage. And then go to the next one. Hopefully this works. Oh, and this disease is always fatal. Once an animal gets it, its clock is ticking. See if you can play that video. Okay, this is a cow elk with late stages of CWD. You can see the excessive salivation, how close the person is to her. She's not scared. You can see her hip bones sticking out. She's emaciated. Her ears aren't real droopy, but you see how she's grinding her teeth. That's another sign that you'll see in animals. Okay, so other TSE, I'm not going to try to say those words again, so we're just going to call it a TSE. Diseases In humans, it's called Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease or Jakob disease. That can be sporadic or it can be familial in humans, but it's like 1 in a million type disease. There's a variant of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease linked to consumption of cattle that had the cattle version, which is bovine spongiform encephalopathy or mad cow disease. So there is a group of folks that they consumed BSE or mad cow in 1985. I think it was 217 cases worldwide, 4 in the US. There's also an endemic version of a TSC disease called Kuru in Papua New Guinea. And that's another thing being studied. We're not sure how that one works. So cattle, again, mad cow disease. Sheep, it's called scrapie. Humans have known about scrapie for more than 250 years. And then there's a type called mink encephalitis found in mink. And I think that's the Norway, Finland, Sweden. I think that's how it was transferred over there. Okay. So there's no strong evidence for the occurrence of CWD in humans. Before CWD was well known, there was a lot of places where it was in these animal populations, and people were most likely eating CWD infected animals. At Fish and Game, we're not doctors, so we follow the CDC recommendation, and their recommendation is if you harvest an animal with CWD, not to eat the meat, So they have on their website, if it's still there, they have recommendations, but basically it says don't eat the meat, handle all of the meat with gloves, and then make sure you wash your instruments that you use to cut up an animal. We have found that a 50-50 bleach solution for 10 minutes also is effective on removing particles for things that are like hard surface things. So obviously you don't want to soak your hands in that, but cutting boards, knives, anything that you use. I will say that if you like your knife, do not soak it in 50 bleach for 10 minutes because it will ruin it.
Yeah.
But that's what we use at check stations. We go through a lot of disposable knives. So
Question, Merritt. Does it have any impact on like your predators, like coyotes, wolves?
strangely enough, no, just like there's been no transmission to humans, there's been no transmission to predators, and they've found that if a lion eats, and it's only been done for lions, but if a lion eats a CWD tainted meat, when it exits the lion, there are no active particles left. So in a lion's gut, whatever acid content is in there is effective in removing the prions. So there's research being done on that. Maybe lions are the answer.
Because these would be like, I would think for the predators, be prime candidates for food.
Right. One of the reasons that we've thought that Idaho, it didn't show up for so long is the fact that we had lots of wolves and lions. And if a deer on the landscape starts acting a little funny, it doesn't take long for predators to notice that animal. So. Okay, so what are we doing for surveillance in Idaho? So we do targeted surveillance, which means somebody's driving along, they see a deer acting funny and they give us a call, we'll go out and put that animal down and test it. Unfortunately, there is no live test available. So to test an animal, it has to be dead. And because you know, most of these animals are so far gone when people notice them. We'd put that animal down anyhow. So, but people are, they're working, I think in Wyoming right now, they're working and trying to come up with a live animal disease, which would be really good because it would allow people in the captive cervid business to test their animals before they were moved. Also, we do general surveillance through hunter harvest and road kills. Anytime we see road kills in an area where we know there's CWD or around those areas, we'll stop and take a test. And then during the hunting season, we do check stations, and we have areas in the state that are CWD zones where it's mandatory that you bring your animal for us to test. But road kills are a good gauge because a lot of these animals don't make it across roads because they don't have their senses about them.
A family friend got her fairly young person, mid-20s, got a job, a temporary, seasonal job in Montana at one of those check stations, going in and reaching in there and getting the whatever it is they grab out of there and doing the CWD testing. And because they have a lot more check stations there and throughout Montana.
Right.
Interesting story she's got.
Yeah.
Every deer that comes through there, every elk gets tested.
And then you get pretty good at it.
Yeah. So you do it in just a few seconds.
We like to take the samples. We started teaching hunters how to do it. But there are some things in the general vicinity of we're looking for a I think they're called sublingual lymph node. They're about that big and they look and kind of feel like a lima bean. They're right next to a salivary gland that looks similar. Salivary gland is very squishy. The lymph nodes, when you press on them, they don't give as much. Then there's a feel to where if you've done it a lot, you can actually reach in there and be talking to the hunter and kind of pull it out because you can feel when you find it. But so pre-detection, this is pre-2022 when we detected it in Idaho. We have been doing surveillance since 1998, targeted surveillance since 1999, and targeted in areas right across the border from where it was in other states. GMU, which is game management unit sampling, they would select a certain amount, randomly select a certain amount of GMUs every year. And so we would do targeted surveillance in those GMUs. And before, so 1998 to 2017, we took 14,656 samples, which we thought was a lot until we got it and really started sampling. And we've taken much more since then. So in 2021, our strategy, and this is right before it was detected in Idaho, was to prioritize reducing CWD impacts through prevention, surveillance, and management. We came up with a carcass import rule where it was unlawful to bring anything but boned out meat and like a skull that had been cleaned from an animal from anywhere that had CWD. And so if you brought something from Montana that through a check station and it wasn't boned out, we would take you aside, help you bone out your animal, take all of those bones and make sure that they got put in a lined landfill. We cut back a lot on any type of feeding because anytime you concentrate animals, you bring them together, you've got nose to nose contact. That's one of the ways that we think it's spreading. Live animal, we had some import regulations on bringing in captive cervids, and we banned natural cervid urine lures. Hunters use like estrus lures. Some of that was collected from actual deer, and so we banned those. Since the live animal import regulations, those have actually been reduced last year by the legislature. So leave that. Okay, so post-detection sampling, we try to measure the prevalence rate of CWD. It's hard to see up there, but now the focus areas are going to be the northeast side of Game Management Unit 1. And then you can see units 14 and 18 are their CWT management zone. So you've got the one in kind of central western Idaho there, and then the one in the northern tip. And then around that, we have what we call a required sampling area. So we have 6 units in Idaho now that you have to have. It's mandatory that anything that you harvest, you have to have sampled. And we have both sampling in our offices. We have, like in in Unit 1, every weekend, we had a check station open all weekend long where you could bring your animal to have it tested. And it was pretty busy up there. And so since 2020, when I said we thought we had a lot of samples, we've had a 350% increase in the number of animals that we sample. And this last year, sample time was about 23 days from the time you submitted a sample to the time you got the results back, which is good because it used to be 4 to 6 weeks. But since a lot of Western states have gotten CWT detections, they've really beefed up their sampling labs. So,
Go ahead, sorry.
prevalence, 2% or less is optimal. And we are below that in Idaho. 5% or less is good. Anything above 5%, and you start to see some population level changes in your herds. So trying to keep the prevalence rate low is the key. So
Those two southern areas there, the management zones, that's like, what's that, like Waha, Cottonwood? Where is that area?
it is Grangeville to Riggins.
Grangeville, Reagan, so it's a little farther south even.
So yeah, the original detection was in Slate Creek, which is in Lower Slate Creek.
Oh, okay. Down low by the.
Down low. And so they've done a bunch of herd reduction in that area. They found it right across the river in Unit 18. But yeah, so ground zero was like Slate Creek. Okay, so in these CWD management zones, which I said we have 2, this is the one in North Idaho. CWD testing is required of all hunter harvested deer. And we request moose and elk. But we will test all of those for people that when we have our check station open. And it's also unlawful to transport carcass of a deer, elk, or moose out of there. By carcass, I mean whole carcass. So the thing that you can transport is boned out meat and a clean skull. Everything else stays right where you killed it so that we're not moving infected parts around. And so the head and the lymph nodes can be taken in for sampling. So in deer, we take the lymph nodes. On moose and elk, we take what's called the obex, which is the brain stem right back here. For some reason in those animals, it shows up first there, whereas deer, it's in the lymph nodes. All right, so our North Idaho results this last year. In Game Management Unit 1, which contained the CMZ, which is right below that, we took 1,428 samples. This is from, I made this last month. So the ND stands for not detected, D detected, and P for pending. There are no more samples pending, and there are no more detections. So we had 6 detections. That was the original deer in Bonners Ferry that we detected. Then we had our hunt in August, trying to get an idea, our prevalence hunt. That was 300 tags. We found 2 more then. And then during the general season, we found three more in that 1,428 deer that we sampled. And then in the rest of the GMUs in the Panhandle, we had no detections. And we sampled, it's not up there because it got cut off, but in unit 9, which is the upper Joe, we sampled a couple of bull elk and there was no detection there. Our prevalence rate in North Idaho right now is 0.033. So prevalence rate is low. We're lucky we found it early. Next slide. Okay, so statewide results. It's hard to see that map, but that map is everywhere that we took a sample. So you can see kind of right in central Idaho there, that's right around the area that it was originally found. And then in North Idaho on the eastern side of the unit is the other CMC. But so in 2024, we had 22 total detections statewide, 19 whitetail deer, 6 of those were the North Idaho, 2 mule deer and 1 elk. And of those, 4 were symptomatic, which means we got called out to a sick animal. We put the animal down and tested it. 2 were road kills and then 16 hunter harvests. Also, right now we have 2 captive cervids that tested positive in unit 63A, which is in southeast Idaho. And those are active quarantines on those facilities now, but we don't manage captive cervids. That's Department of Agriculture. So they're dealing with that right now. Okay. So what can hunters do to prevent spread of CWD? One, just know and follow the rules for CWD management zones and testing. When you dispose of carcasses, any carcass that is, not just something that you think might be positive. If we can get those double bagged and take it to a lined landfill, that is the best possible place to dispose of those. Or if you're backcountry hunting, leaving everything on the ground where you harvested it and just taking out meat and clean skulls. Getting animals tested. In North Idaho, I tell everybody, we test the animals for free. All you have to do is get them to us. And it takes, we say 4 to 6 weeks, but like I said, it was 23-day turnaround. So it's not that long to wait to see if your animal tests positive before you start consuming it. Report symptomatic animals that you see. We do get a lot in Hayden, especially where there's an adult gardens. Every deer that is limping or has got stuck in a fence, they all have CWD now. So we do test a lot of those, but we appreciate people being aware. And also we highly encourage people that are feeding animals now not to do it because it just concentrates animals. Okay. And so up there I have the Idaho CWD that's on our website, talks about what we're doing for monitoring, test results, sampling, laws, etc. There's a Chronic Wasting Disease Alliance. There's a lot of good information on that website. CDC, again, hopefully that's still up. I don't know. I haven't checked it lately, but they had a good informative website. And then the USGS National Wildlife Health Center, that's where I got those maps of the spread. It's got some good information there as well. Anybody have more questions?
Wow, great presentation. Stunning. Everybody should see this and hear this information.
Well, and
You gotta get the word out.
the more we get it out, the better off we'll be, because there are a lot of misunderstandings
Yeah.
about CWD.
A lot of the Idaho information is encouraging, the 0.03. What about east of the main range there, where you see this almost exponential increase in CWD, and it's just rapidly moving up and down that north-south corridor? How does that play out in worst case, best case?
So there are states in the US that are seeing population level changes in their animals and a huge reduction in hunting. So if you live in an area where there's a 50-50 chance that a deer has CWD and you can't eat the meat, or you're encouraged not to eat the meat,
right.
do you even want to go hunting? Also, CWD affects age structure. So older bucks have the highest prevalence rate, and that is just out of deer biology. Older bucks have been around longer. And so two of the samples that we got, so four of our samples were within a mile of each other in North Idaho. The two that weren't were older bucks, and they were like 5 miles away, and it was during the rut that they were killed. So bucks move a lot. They interact with a lot more deer. So they're kind of, there are super spreaders, but they're also more susceptible. So they start to disappear out of a population. So another driver, so there's a couple of drivers why people hunt. People hunt for trophies, people hunt for meat. So if you have a 50-50 chance that you can't eat it and you know there are no big bucks left, why would you go hunting? That's the problem that they're seeing when prevalence gets too high. And at that point, it's kind of out of the hands of the Fish and Game Department of how to, ways to control it. And it goes to, culling operations,
Right, yeah.
things like that.
Are they reducing the number of hunting permits they're allowing in those areas too, just because if the population's already declining?
So actually, what most agencies do is they don't reduce them, they increase them. Because if you can lower the density of deer,
Yeah.
you have less deer interacting with each other. So one of our ways in up around Bonners Ferry is that we can help reduce the density of deer, because it's one of the highest densities of whitetail deer in the state right now. And if we don't reduce the density of those deer, it will spread faster. So it's kind of a catch-22 for a game department. You don't want to reduce your herds,
Mm-hmm.
but in order to not have them, for the good of the herd, there needs to be less density of animals.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Do you actually increase tags as a result?
Yes. So
Does word spread to hunters from areas where they don't want to hunt to come to Idaho?
So we had, in all of Unit 1, I think we had 900 extra doe tags available last year. We had just a general season, and then we had that surveillance hunt, which was in August, just to try to get an idea of, okay, we've got one detection, how far has this spread? So we found it hadn't spread. All of our detections were really close during that. They were all antlerless whitetails, and they were all within like a couple of 100 yards of each other.
Wow.
And a couple of 100 yards from what we thought was the source, which is the Bonners Ferry dump,
Oh,
because people had been dumping carcasses there. It was not fenced. This coming year, we have 1,000 doe tags just in the CMZ, which is half the unit that used to have 900. And then the other half the unit has much less. So we're trying to concentrate harvest. Plus there's some either sex tag, like we just put a whole bunch of tags in there.
Okay.
And from surveys that we've done, we think that there's probably over 25,000 deer in that area.
okay.
There's just a lot of farmland and a lot of private land, so it's difficult for us with not being able to work from the air because the amount of trees up here. it's difficult to get a count. So we're gonna try to reduce the numbers up there, reduce the density of deer.
Is there a plan or a program in place where if somebody gets a deer, they come in and it tests positive? If you guys still have tags or season available, like go out, here's another tag, go try again.
We don't do that mostly because the testing length has been long enough.
Yeah,
That usually the season's over by the time you get your test results back.
yeah,
I'm not sure if in the future, if testing time continues to go down, if
Yeah.
we're gonna do that or not. I know that in certain circumstances, say somebody shoots a deer and they open it up and something's obviously wrong and it's got an infection, or a lot of times an animal that's been shot or injured, you'll open it up and the liver's got spots all over it and it's kind of gross and stinky. And sometimes you'll find like a big cyst, and there'll be like a piece of broken antler from fighting, or a bullet, or a broadhead in that. If people bring those in, often we'll replace their tags, but that's kind of immediate. You know, you shoot it on Tuesday and you have a new tag on Wednesday versus
Right.
having to send off samples and then get them back. So
Where do the samples go? So, do they go to a regional laboratory somewhere?
Colorado.
Colorado.
And so every time that there's a positive, they retest it to make sure. And so that's why we take both lymph nodes, because you test one, test the other. And then again, like moose and elk, you can take the lymph nodes and the Obex and send it all in for them to test. So,
Fascinating.
yeah. And it's, again, there's lots of states right now doing research, trying to figure out this disease, because it is starting to affect herds in some areas. So